Hey friends, welcome back to Hey Wait. If you're someone who cares deeply, thinks a lot, and often finds yourself second guessing your instincts, especially in your professional life, this episode is for you. My guest today is Melody Wilding, and she is a powerhouse. She's also a friend and a colleague who I like to affectionately call my East Coast doppelganger. We met through a mastermind group for women entrepreneurs about 4 years ago, and it turned out we have a lot in common. We're both LinkedIn learning instructors. We're both invested in helping people navigate the intersection of sensitivity and success. And little trivia for you, we even got married on the exact same day. Melody is the author of Trust Yourself, and most recently her second book, Managing Up: How to Get What You Need from the People in Charge. She's helped high-achieving professionals at places like Google, JP Morgan, and Verizon manage their emotions, stop overthinking, and get the recognition and respect they deserve. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Harvard Business Review, CNBC, Fast Company, and more. Oh, and she also happens to be a licensed social worker, a former emotions researcher, and a professor of human behavior at Hunter College. In today's conversation, you're going to learn about her professional power position framework, which is all about how understanding your own psychology and the psychology of the people you work with can unlock your influence, your confidence, and your clarity at work. And I'm telling you, this framework is brilliant and it's going to help you. But we're also going to go beyond the framework because Melody recently made a pivot in her own work, a hey wait moment that brought her more into alignment with who she really is now. And I'm excited for you to hear about that experience because I know how many of you listening are on the edge of that kind of shift for yourselves. So not only is Melody going to offer you fantastic tools for managing up and showing up powerfully in your work, but she's also going to reflect back what it looks like to trust yourself in the process of change. Melody is deeply perceptive, and she has a gift for weaving together insight across disciplines to give practical, grounded guidance. So if you identify as smart, ambitious, and sensitive, and you feel like you keep getting chewed up in corporate, or you struggle with trusting yourself, or you have imposter syndrome, or you overthink, Melody is going to be your new fairy godmother. And I can't wait for you to hear her. So let's get into it. Hello, Melody.
Hello, my friend. Great to be with you.
I know. Welcome. We were just talking about what it's like to have a podcast. And one of the things that I absolutely love the most about it is that I get to have people on that I've respected and enjoyed for years and get to share them with people. So it's a delight to get to have you here and share you with people.
Well, likewise, and thank you because you came on my show recently, and that was a lot of people's favorite episode because you always have such a fresh take on whether it's managing your emotions or not people pleasing or overthinking. And so everyone really appreciated it, and I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember I talked about living from your neck down on that one, and you were like, "Oh, I think I need that."
Still working on that.
Yeah, aren't we all? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, listener, if you don't know Melody from any other way than how I just introduced her, the thing I want you to know before we go further in this conversation is you, Melody, I think are one of the most generous and prolific creators of content as a coach and an educator. I mean, your LinkedIn posts, your Psychology at Work podcast, Harvard Business Review articles, your books, they're all such gold. And the thing that makes them so good, listener, is that they are a very uncommon combination of really actionable, smart, and empathic. And the reason why they can be empathic is because you have really been in the places where the people you work with are in. And I know you know this because we've talked about this before, but most of us are teaching the thing we most need to learn. So will you share with us a little bit about how you got into the work that you're doing based upon your own personal experience?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And especially as you know this too, as a content creator and someone who just on the internet that a lot of times you feel like you're shouting into the void, and you don't, you put something out and you're like, did anybody read this? Did anybody enjoy this? So it means a lot coming from you. I've always been, and you probably relate to this as well, that from the time I was a kid, I was one of those kids who knew I wanted to do something in psychology. If you asked like 10-year-old Melody what she wanted to do, I would say I wanted to be a therapist. So it's just kind of wired into me, just being curious about why do people do the things they do, trying to understand whether it was family dynamics or friendships, and being someone who was very insecure most of my life. Again, still working on that.
Yeah.
But I have been, a big concept I talk about is being what I call a sensitive striver. And that concept entirely came out of my own experience, where I always felt like I had this combination of just thinking and feeling everything really deeply, but also being very driven and hard on myself. And that becomes, again, it comes with a lot of assets, but can also be your downfall if you are not careful. And that was in a large way my story, is that I let some of my traits and qualities run amok and go unchecked. It was some of the things I was mentioning before: overthinking, people pleasing, having no boundaries, just perfectionism. And it really drove me into the ground. Now, the good news is that I did end up going to school and studying psychology and human behavior and neuroscience. I'm a licensed social worker. So when I had that sort of rock bottom moment, it was kind of staring me in the face that, oh, I actually have all of the tools to fix this for myself. I just have to turn this around, and I have to turn the mirror around and look at myself. And, flash forward now 12 years, and that's what I've been doing, is really helping bring some of those psychological, helping understand the mental and emotional side of work, because that's what I was always fascinated by, that every day we have these struggles, whether it's a difficult conversation we need to have, or someone seems angry with us, or there's a power struggle with a project, that's happening every day. Yet it seemed like no book, no article, no coach or person I could find was talking about that. And so that's where I hoped to come in, and the gap I hoped to fill.
Oh my gosh, you absolutely have. And I think one of the things that I've always really admired about you, or maybe, I guess admires is the right word, is that you, because we are wired so similarly, that you actually went into like a job first. You had a career, and I didn't do that because I knew I was going to get eaten up and spit out. Like, there was no way that I could fathom being in those kind of dynamics. So to me, the thing that fascinates me about your story is that you did have that sensitivity from early on. You wanted to understand the dynamics internally and externally, and that you still had the bravery to go into that den.
Well, I'm here now, so there's
Yeah.
It didn't last.
Yeah.
And when you say that, when I put the pieces together of, instead of just blaming myself for why couldn't I hack it in this job, and why does everybody else seem to take these things in strides, when I started to put it together of, oh, this is how I'm wired, right? That is a neutral fact, and I have to make decisions based on that fact. When I started to see it that way, now in retrospect, I see all the reasons why certain positions or roles didn't work out for me. And I remember one situation where I was working up by Columbia Medical School, so New York. These are small spaces, and this was at a research lab. And the lab space was probably the size of a small walk-in closet, if that's generous. And there were about 6 different chairs, like computer stations. And if you backed up your chair, you would hit somebody else. And it was like you were also kind of all hovering over
My whole body is tight right now, Melody.
Yeah. And I couldn't understand. I would kind of look around and be like, am I the only person who this is driving completely nuts? And I
Yeah.
thought, like, I couldn't understand why that was. And now I get it, having a heightened nervous system where
Oh
it's
my
like you
God.
are processing everything. As sensitive people, we hate to be watched and observed. And I just felt like someone was hovering over my shoulder all hours of the day. And needless to say, I left that job pretty quickly because
I would imagine.
I just, it, understanding that the environment was not a right fit for how I was wired was huge. But of course, at the time, I blamed myself for that. But I see so many instances of that over the years now.
Oh my gosh. I think there probably are a ton of people listening right now who can relate to that experience of like, this is not working for me. And yet the next place they go in their head is, what's wrong with me? I should be able to do this. There's something broken about me that I can't hack this. And I think that's such an important message for people to hear, that hopefully someone else can hear that and then not have to learn that retrospectively. Just be able to say in the moment, oh, this isn't for me.
That's right.
And
That's right.
yeah. Which leads me to, there was a quote in your book that when I read it, it shocked me, but at the same time, it was like, yeah, that makes total sense. And so I want to read the quote. It's, during the last few years, the number of professionals who believe they have little to no control over their careers, futures, and work relationships has doubled. A staggering 40% of workers grapple with a sense of helplessness. They don't have a sense of where they stand. And as I'm reading that right now, like I notice I'm getting moved by that. That it's like 40% of workers are grappling with a sense of helplessness. And again, I'm assuming there is a person listening right now that's going, yeah, that's me. So can you, well, you can say what you want about that statistic if you like, and I would love to use that as a jumping off place for you to tell us about the professional power position framework that your book is all about, because I think this is just a gift to give that person who is feeling like they don't have control.
Well, that stat right there was why I wrote Managing Up, because this is the skill set you need to be able to navigate imperfect conditions with imperfect people, because we can still find agency even within that. And what I noticed is, I think this is happening on both a macro level and a micro level, where we have so much uncertainty in the economy, in the world overall. And so there's this sense of being at the whim of all of that and not knowing what's coming tomorrow. And all of this started back in 2020. But there's also the micro instances of that every day, whether it's another reorgs being announced, or suddenly a person has been pulled off a project, or you've been assigned to a new one. All of those little changes, even working remotely or being distributed, where we don't have access to organic interactions with people, and you start overthinking or second guessing, why did my boss use a period instead of an exclamation point? And all of a sudden you're down this spiral about,
And that's 3 a.m. when you're doing that, by the way. Yeah.
Exactly, of course. And all of that, I have just encountered so many people who feel jerked around by the politics, the personalities, the dynamics around them. And then, again, all of this is only sped up since 2020. So
Yes.
that was a core reason why I wanted to write this book, because you were mentioning that idea of the professional power position. And that's sort of been this unifying concept that's brought all of my work over the last 12 years together, which is this idea that in order to be successful and fulfilled, there's two sides to that equation. You need to master your own inner psychology. You need to trust yourself. You need to work through your own patterns and insecurities. But on the other side, you also need to be able to influence and navigate other people's psychology, other people's quirks, idiosyncrasies, communication styles, the group dynamics that are happening around you. And when you can do both of those when you're able to, you know so much about this, when you're able to regulate yourself in a difficult conversation, well, guess what? Then you have more influence and you can present your case more compellingly and get buy-in for that idea. And so we really need both sides of that in order to be able to show up most confidently and feel most in control.
So the first time I saw this written about, I think it was before your book came out, and you'd put out a Venn diagram showing that this professional power position is, because I love me a good Venn diagram. It's such an embodied, like, oh, I get that. And it was, over here in one circle is you understanding your internal psychology. And over here in the other circle was you understanding the other person's psychology. And it was like, the moment I saw that, I was like, dang, Melody did it again. This is so good. And it also was like, why haven't we figured that out before now? Because I kind of feel like, and I haven't read every business development book there is, but it does seem like there's a lot of books that are about like, here's how you manage yourself. And that was your first book, Trust Yourself, right? And there's a lot of books about here's how you understand and work with other people. But this one, the way they combine, I think it's, to me, what excited me about it is that one, it works, right? But two, it's relational. That's what is so important to me about my work, that I started by teaching people have your own back. And that was the exact same thing. Like, you need to have some sense of agency and partnership with yourself. And then we're moving into how do you do that with other people? And I think for all the scary negative trends that are out there in the world right now, this is a trend that is really positive and exciting, that I think we were really beginning to understand relationality in the way that when you were telling me about, little Melody, like little Melody was sensitive, and she already knew in elementary school she was going to be a psychologist, because you were already doing that thing where you were trying to figure out the people around you and trying to figure out you at the same time. And they do go through, more attention to one than the other at times. But I think the integration, the maturation of being a relational person is you can do both at the same time.
Yes. And you went exactly where my head is going. I was just going to say something like that, which is the most sophisticated part of this skill set, or I'm always telling my clients that what I feel is the hallmark of professional maturity is being able to be adaptable and responsive in a situation, responsive to somebody else's style or needs or whatever it is, without completely losing yourself. So it's this really fine line of knowing how much of myself do I conceal or shape shift even to be known by this person, understood by this person, connect with them, but still stay true to who I am. And that requires such an advanced level of discernment and situational awareness to read the room, to understand not just what's happening in this one interaction, but also what's the whole like ecosystem we sit in, and all the what's the emotional temperature of that. And that is just, to me, you were saying, there's a lot of chaos going on right now. And especially a lot of the people I talk to, and even colleagues I've talked to who are in the coaching field, are nervous about AI. Is it coming to replace our jobs? It's never going to be able to replace that advanced level of relationality and situational awareness and responsiveness. So I think when you actually lean into this and focus on really building this as a skill set, that is a huge competitive advantage.
Right. And how badass to think that for all the stuff that AI might come in and do better than us, AI not being able to do this will make us better at this. Because it, like you said, we'll be able to lean into these places. And it is nuanced and it is challenging, but it's a skill and it takes practice. And your book is all about like, here are the strategies, here are the scripts, because who doesn't love a good script for like here's what to say in this situation. And you talk about the 10 most important conversations that we should be having in terms of taking back your power position in your job and your career. So could you give us a specific example of a tool that you teach people that is this, like, how do you stay with yourself and stay with another person at the same time?
Yes. Let's talk about the boundaries conversation. That's a big one, right? Where this conflict comes in of, I want to be a team player. I want to look like I'm committed and I'm giving my all. At the same time, I don't want to burn myself out. I don't want to look like a pushover that every time someone asks me for something, I just bend over. So how do I balance those two things? That's what the boundaries conversation is about. And I think something I like to say is that no is a complete sentence in pretty much every other aspect of life except in the workplace. Because if you imagine a colleague came to you and asked you for a favor and all you say is no, you'll be totally turned off by that and be like, well, I'm never asking you for anything again.
Yeah.
And so we need to tread that fine line. And like you said, I love a good script. I love good phrasing because I think it just gives people something to grasp onto. It gives us a sense of safety to walk into a hard situation and be like, okay, I can do this. Even if you don't say the script exactly as it is, it just gives you that little boost. And one of my favorite frameworks from that chapter is the idea of the trade-off. So the trade-off approach is acknowledging the reality that if I'm taking on something else, well, then another thing has to give. And the beauty of that is you're still approaching it being collaborative. Essentially, the message behind it is, I want to help you. I want to get this done, but I need you to work with me on this. So it's kind of a both and, that I'm willing to be a team player, but within boundaries. And with the trade-off approach, you might say, I understand that we need to get this to the client by the end of the week. In order to do that, we'll need to delegate something else, or I'll need to temporarily put this aside. Are you okay with that? Or what would you like me to put aside?
Love
And
that.
so by doing that, you're framing the conversation. You're not just helplessly saying, I can't believe you're asking me that, or just the knee-jerk yes. You are framing the decision. You are shaping the dynamic because you're saying, listen, I'm not doing both. We're going to have to pick, right? And subtly, if you need to, it can also help to put the decision-making power back in the other person's hand. Like, let's say this is someone who is 2 levels above you, or the CEO of your company comes to you and says, I need this really quickly. Well, if you can say, here's this trade-off, what would you like? Right? It feels like you're deferring to them, which in some situations you might have to be aware of the hierarchy. And
but at the same time, it just feels so powerful. I'm
exactly.
Imagining being like, it's like you saying, that's not going to happen, but you get to do it in a way that's super grown up and really, really considerate and mature. And like, actually, I'm going to let you make that decision. That's so ninja. I love it.
Yeah. And Jay, if I could, because I think this mindset shift is important, that underlies all of this, is going from, especially when we're talking about managing up, right? We have power dynamics baked into this. And for many of us who are lifelong recovering people pleasers, we were told to be just deferential to authority. Don't step out of turn. Don't, you're there to do your job, keep your head down, do what you're told. Thankfully, that's shifting. But what I find is still many of us place ourselves in this order taker role when it comes to someone who has higher authority than us. We treat ourselves like a subordinate. And then when we see ourselves that way, that's how we act in accordance with our beliefs, or we act consistently with our beliefs and our self-image. So if you see yourself as a subordinate, you're not going to speak up when you want to challenge something your boss says. You're not going to push back when they dump another thing on your plate. But if you shift to seeing yourself more as a trusted advisor or a partner to your manager, that actually it's part of my obligation to inform leadership when I see there's a risk of something going off track. So it's actually my responsibility to surface it to my leader that, okay, if you want that done, then this other thing we're going to be late on. Are you okay with that? because your
Yes.
boss doesn't have line of sight to that. So even just changing that mentality really shifts how you approach the whole conversation.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the mindset shift, because as I was listening, when you were describing the boundary perspective in that tool, the first thing that was going through my mind was how, in my work, I talk about that there's two realities, and that the fallacy that a lot of us people pleasers get into is that as soon as we're around someone else, especially someone who we see as more powerful than us or a boss, our reality goes out the door. It's just like, well, we will reclaim that when we get home or around people that we're equals with. And you framing the boundaries in that way is like saying, no, so here's my reality. Here's the reality I see for you. Here's the reality I see for the organization, given this situation. And that is such a more, again, to come back to, that's such a more relational way of being in it, that yes, there are roles and there are hierarchies, but that underneath all of the roles is our common humanity, in which we all are inherently equals. And so I love that that tool is a way for someone to embody, no, I actually get to be a partner in this.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you said that, because so many of the people I work with, and you may find this as well, that they put those with positional power on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, it makes every interaction with them more intimidating, that they're judging you, they're scrutinizing you at this higher level. Everything has to be perfect, right? And so I'm always talking, and I mean this kind of facetiously, but when I talk with my clients, I'm like, imagine that, whatever it is, an SVP who's several levels above you, who you're intimidated to present to. Imagine that person wakes up in the morning, their kids are jumping all over them, they spill stuff on their shirt, they got to get changed again, then something's wrong with the car on the way to work. That they have those struggles, those blunders, those annoyances, just like we do. And when you can almost visualize that, and that person becomes Bob or Nancy and not the SVP of global marketing, it humanizes. It humanizes them. It takes away so much of that fear, and it just makes it this person to person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I hope for the listener right now, you're probably thinking about the people that you're in relationships with, in your positions at work. And I'm hoping you can start to invite that experience into your body. Like, what would it be like to put myself in the room as an equal with this person, to not see them as one up to me and me as one down to them, but actually feel it in your bones, so that then when the words come out of your mouth, it's matching your experience. Because I think that's a really powerful dual practice, to be able to feel it so that you can speak it from a place of experience in your own body. Yes. Yeah. I want to change gears for just a moment and go back to when you were talking about the professional power position and, your latest book, Managing Up. As your friend and as your colleague, what I'm excited about, in addition to just how helpful this is to so many people around the world, is how this is an example of your own iterating in your work as you're developing as a person and growing and changing as a person. Because as an entrepreneur, it's impossible to not iterate, and impossible to not, at times, maybe feel like you're coming across as wishy-washy, or I can't come up with a different word for it right now, but as you yourself are changing, your work changes. And so I think what's cool about seeing Managing Up is like, oh, this is how melody is changing too. And I know it's gotten even more potent in the last year or so. So would you be willing to share with us some of the things you changed your mind on in the last year?
Yeah. Again, you said it perfectly. It's hard when you're a business owner, an entrepreneur in particular, because who you are is literally manifested in assets and visuals and things on the internet that other people see and consume and that have a life of their own. And then it's hard when you are even, I think the hardest part for me was being in this kind of messy middle, like that gray area where I could feel something was different, but I couldn't articulate it. And I felt frustrated and even a bit hemmed in by what I had focused on for so long, which was this idea of being a sensitive striver and navigating that at work. Because with that, I still love the topic and I could chat about it all day, but I felt boxed into this persona I had created for myself of this very compassionate, sweet, soft, gentle. And I am that. It's
You
hard.
are.
Yeah, it's hard for me to be anything but there is this other side to me that is a little more direct and bolder, that I move quickly. It's more of the striver side that I think I had overly leaned into the sensitive side, and I felt like I had to be that for everyone. And
Oh my gosh.
my emotional signal that something is off is when I feel resentment. And I started to notice that when I felt resentment, even to things like someone would email in a typo on my website or something wasn't working, and I felt resentment because I was putting this pressure on myself to feel like I had to send this very understanding, empathetic response to say, thank you so much for reaching out. We really appreciate you letting us know about this. We've gone ahead and corrected that right away, instead of just saying thanks. And that may sound so.
No, I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I'm like, oh my God, I know this so much.
You understand it. And let me just be completely clear that this was only happening in my head. So I don't think that most other people were putting that expectation on me. This was all self-created. And I had to really, that was a wake-up call for me to say, like, this resentment is almost entirely self-created. I think some people have been maybe a little off-put that I'm cursing a little bit more, or I am being a little more direct. And you know what? That's totally fine. But yeah, being in the messy area was very hard. And also just being, of course, there's the fear of like, well, what are people going to think? And, it was kind of weighing between, do I continue like not wearing a mask, but the emotional labor felt so exhausting. Yeah.
The way I feel it in my body when you talk about it. And I remember talking to you in the real messy middle when you were like, I don't know what's going on, but this doesn't feel good. Like, it feels like it's just too small. Like you're wearing clothes that don't fit anymore. And yeah, you could wear them every day and just be uncomfortable and have to reorganize how you're sitting all the time. But like at some point, just get some new clothes that fit you. Right?
Yes. Or have you ever lived in a space where you're in that space and you realize, wow, everything here looks so dated, and it doesn't look like it reflects me now. I sort of, it felt like that as well. Yeah.
Well, and it's fun too to like, I was looking at your book again this morning and before talking with you, and the author photo in the cover jacket is the old photo of you, and it's like your head's to the side and there's like this sweet smile. And believe me, as my number one strength in the Strengths Finder is empathy. And like I've led with empathy for most of my life, and it is definitely my superpower, but it has also been my greatest kryptonite. And like I see in that, I'm like, oh, I know that. That's the like, what do you need from me? And then your new pictures are like sassy and you're wearing bright colors and you've got a big smile on your face. And as someone who really cares about you, it's just fun to see you claim that. And I know from my own experience how it's both terrifying and liberating.
Yeah.
This is, we talk on the show a lot about, hey, wait moments where it's like, hey, wait, this isn't me anymore. Or I don't feel like I get to show up completely as myself. And when anyone claims that. There is something about that that is absolutely thrilling and liberating. And then there's also, it's really scary. So I wonder if you could speak to, as you've been doing this longer and showing up in this new branded way, what's been scary and what's been fun?
What has been scary, I think, is worrying about being misunderstood. Worrying that I will say something and have it twisted the wrong way. And that, knock on wood, has not happened yet. But people do, I may have told you this story, I can't remember. But I wrote an article for HBR sometime last year, and it was about how to work for a highly critical boss. The comments on that were unlike anything I had ever read. And this there are some articles I write where I'm like, oh, I'm going to get flack for this one. But this was not one where I expected that. But the comments were all about HBR. How could you have a writer who is telling people to gaslight themselves and stay in an abusive situation? We're just all along those lines about how I was telling people to. I think what really triggered people, yeah, and I think what really triggered people was there was a tip I shared in that article that getting feedback or criticism from a manager like that is a form of engagement. Unfortunately, that is how someone who is very dominant and aggressive, it's often how they engage and relate to other people. They poke holes in things. They ask a lot of questions. And I know you know what I mean. But it was twisted. I was misunderstood. And you know what? I survived and it's been fine. Haven't been canceled yet, but I do live in fear of that. It feels like a very when you're online and you're public, it does feel like a more tenuous position. You know, someone could say something about something you've done and what do you do? So that's been scary.
Can I interrupt you there before you go on to tell us about the fun and liberating part and ask, I know, you said it hasn't happened in the big scale, but that alone, that Harvard Business Review article, that would have gotten me. What do you do in those moments or any moments? Like, do you have a personal practice or a ritual or something that you do to help you align with yourself and stay with yourself? I mean, you read the book, Stay With Yourself, so I'm assuming you do.
What a great question. Well, I don't know if this is healthy or not, but I have gotten to the point where I can read those and I do have the reaction of, oh, did I do something wrong? I still have that sort of honor roll, like, oh no, someone's mad at me. I'm getting chastised here. I did something wrong, right? Report to the principal's office kind of a feeling. But I'm able to pretty quickly snap out of that now to say, well, the internet is being the internet and it will do what it does. And so I think some of that has come with time and practice, but I do feel like I'm able to perspective take much better than I ever have in my life, to be able to say, mentally flash myself forward, even 12 hours, but if not a month, a year, 10 years from now, I'm not going to even remember this situation. So why should I worry about this right now? And that sort of centering of myself to get myself out of that catastrophic panic response that happens when I feel like I've made somebody else mad, that I think has been my saving grace.
Yeah. I can feel that. It's like, get yourself out of the urgency of now.
Yeah.
And the perspective of, is this going to matter to me even tomorrow? That's a really powerful thing to do though, because in the moment when your nervous system is going into fight, flight, freeze, everything about that feels life and death. And to just give yourself that again, it's a, hey, wait moment. It's like, hey, wait, I don't think this is going to matter X days from now. Let me feel what that would feel like. I can imagine how that would give you.
Yeah. And I think even more than that, it's reassuring myself I'm going to be okay. Right. Because in the moment, I feel not okay. I feel like because I have angered somebody else, I've created a lack of safety, right? So zooming ahead and saying, you know what, I won't even remember this. It's like, I will be okay. And,
Yeah.
that has also been very soothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then back to what has been fun and liberating about this, taking the too small clothes off.
Well, speaking of clothes, I mean, wearing brighter colors, it's been so
Yeah.
fun, but, it actually has been great challenging myself to pull up the provocative perspectives I do have, because I've spent so much of my life trying to not upset anybody, trying not to rock any apple carts, that I almost don't. There have been periods of my life, and there are still areas of my life where I don't know what I think or I don't know what I want. And so it really has challenged me to say, what is my stance on this, and how does that go against the grain and what everybody else thinks? And so that's been a really good practice to kind of reestablish what is my point of view. And, as I've put this out there more and clients have seen the transformation, they have said, like, I see what you're doing. It's given me permission to accept that invite to that conference and be on that panel, or to be more direct with that person that I've been beating around the bush, giving them that feedback. And, I think it also gets to this idea that being sensitive and empathetic does not have to equate to being a pushover and just being overly nice, right?
Right.
Empathy is about, how do I say this? I mean, you could probably articulate it better than I can, but empathy is, yes, connecting with someone and trying to experience what they're experiencing, but also you may have to hold firm on something to say, you know what, you're going to be okay, right? And this is not going to be, not to gaslight someone, but to say, you're going to get through this and everything will be fine. And so empathy is not always being the, oh, woe is me, let me caretake for you.
Caretaking, rescuing, all of that. Yeah. Yeah. It's yesterday I was having a conversation with my neighbor and dear friend who is also wired exactly like us. Hello, Sarah, because you said you'd listen. And we were talking about how this is a evolution from being a helper to a leader. And because, again, you and I, we have such parallel paths in our own way. But for me in my own work, I feel like that empath in me led out as a helper. And there is some quality to that feels like I have to take care of you. Whereas being a leader, and this is what I see you doing, like in your pictures now, I'm like, there's a leader, right? Like you are showing this is what it is to be sensitive and empathic and ambitious and striving. And you can teach and lift up through doing rather than being the one doing the heavy lifting all the time. It doesn't mean that you aren't still helping. It just means that there's a whole nother layer to how you are serving people.
Yeah. That's a fantastic way to put it, from helper to leader. Exactly.
Yeah. In your flashy, bright clothes.
That's right.
Which I'm a fan of. Well, so how can people find you?
You can head to melodywilding.com. Everything is there. I have freebies, information about both of the books, my programs. That's the best place.
Yeah, and here's her book for anyone who's watching it. This is her book. It's really good. Like I said, it is full of the best things, which are stories, strategies, and scripts. It's in there. And you have generously offered to do a giveaway of a signed copy of your book for people who are listening to this podcast and go over to my Instagram, Hey Wait with Jay. And there'll be a post there. And if you leave a comment about your biggest takeaway from our conversation today, you will be in the drawing to get a free copy of Managing Up from Miss Melody Wilding herself.
Yes.
The very.
That's right. Be original. And thank you, Jay. This was a lot of fun. I had no doubt you and I could talk forever, literally. And I'm just excited to share the book with your audience.
Yes, me too. And I know I had to cut myself off. I told you how long we would go for, and then I was like, oh, but we could go so much longer. Which means I'll just have to have you back, which I'm sure I will. And thank you for not just sharing about your book and your teachings, because we were saying beforehand, I was like, you've been on an absolute freaking blitz for this book recently and doing a lot of podcasts, but sharing a little bit more of the behind the scenes with us and what it's like for you on your insides, because I think that's it's again back to that helper versus leader. Like it is a way that I know I have benefited from how similar we are, because I learned from you. I'm like, oh yeah. That's true for me too. I couldn't have articulated that. So I hope you, listener, have gotten some of that from Melody today as well. And if you resonated with this podcast and you know someone else who is wired like this, my first request would be share it with that person. Spread the love. And then secondly, hit follow wherever you listen to your podcast so that you can stay up to date for the next conversation. And I think that's it. I just want to thank you again, Melody, for being here.
Well, thank you, Jay, for this opportunity, for your friendship, your support over all these years. I'm incredibly grateful to know you and to call you a friend.
I feel exactly the same way. And thank you, listener. Like I said, so good to have you here. And hey, wait, before we go, I want you to remember that your insides matter and the right people will meet you there. So stay with yourself. And I'll see you next time.